The Trump administration and the AP are currently in a bit of a spat.
The AP said this week that the White House blocked them from multiple press events. One of them was a press conference with President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
Why did that happen? Apparently because the AP refuses to change their editorial guidelines on how to label the Gulf of America. The outlet says they're sticking with the Gulf of Mexico, since the AP is an international outlet and not every country recognizes the name change.
Here's a CNN panel getting feisty over the subject.
This is a power play, plain and simple. The president wants people to obey. He wants people to use the words he chooses. He wants people to fall in line, and if they don't, they lose their access. They're not allowed to be in the company of the president.
If the bully manages to bully one, he's not going to stop at one.
I don't think this is as emotional as you're making it out to be. You know, take away the hysteria for a moment. First off, Trump doesn't need
Who's
AP
being
to
hysterical?
Take, both of you. Trump doesn't need, first of all, AP
You
to
obviously
take
don't know what a
his
hysterical and a Navarro is
I
like.
just believe it comes down to compliance.
That's true,
Trump put out an executive order. There was an executive order. He changed the name legally to Gulf of America. They're United States-based. I know they're international as well, but right now they're covering U.S. politics. So if he makes an executive order, they should respect that. And if they don't, being there is not a right, it's a privilege.
The AP released a statement on the matter, writing, "The decision by the White House to block an AP reporter from an open press conference with President Trump and Prime Minister Modi is a deeply troubling escalation of the administration's continued efforts to punish the Associated Press for its editorial decisions." The AP called this an incredible disservice to the billions of people who rely on the Associated Press for nonpartisan news.
Editor at the Daily Signal, Bradley Devlin, wrote on X, "During the Biden administration, the AP changed their style to no longer call what was happening at the border a crisis, essentially because Jen Psaki asked them to during a briefing. Naming the Gulf of America was an official policy decision from the U.S. government. What seems more troubling, the former or the latter?"
Meanwhile, Bulwark editor Jonathan Last wrote on Blue Sky, "The legacy media was quick to defend Fox in 2009 when it thought Obama was being mean. Today, with the AP, crickets. The difference is that media organizations knew they had nothing to fear from Obama, so protesting was free." This again seems, we were talking earlier in the show about the Kennedy Center, and this seems to me another instance of trivial, or I should say petty, but important behavior by the Trump administration that aims to intimidate or to punish people for not doing what the president wants. The AP can stick with, as far as I'm concerned, the name Gulf of Mexico if it likes. This was a decision that was taken to unilaterally just change the name with a stroke of the pen. The AP notes its international status and all of that. The bigger point here, I think, is about freedom of speech generally, but also about the capacity of news organizations to use the language that they believe to be accurate and fair and impartial, not the language that the Trump administration decrees that it wants to have used. So even though we can laugh about some of the absurdity of Gulf of America versus Gulf of Mexico, the actual underlying point isn't funny at all, because it's really a president and his allies trying to dictate to media organizations the language that they use, and I think that's very dangerous.
Bullying is the name of the game for the Trump administration. It's worked for them before, and I assume they're going to keep using that tactic. This is out of line with the spirit of the First Amendment. I'm not sure about the legal aspects of it, but certainly with the spirit of it, you don't want to be blocking major news organizations from the press room in any case, and you've seen the Trump administration do this. So if they've replaced a lot of the mainstream media with conservative media outlets, they're clearly biased, Newsmax,
right,
One America, those guys. But again, as with the entertainment industry, the conservatives are not completely wrong that there has been a left-wing bias in the mainstream media for quite some time. And I believe that conservatives love seeing this. I wouldn't do this if I was president, but conservatives, many of the Trump supporters, love seeing this. This is one of the reasons they voted for Trump, because they know he'll attack the media. He'll go after CNN. He'll go after all these organizations that they have come to hate over the last 40 years. Now, will it work? I certainly hope not, but the Biden administration did this too. I seem to remember Joe Biden keeping the Washington Post out of the press room because they did a story on Hunter that the Biden administration didn't like. I could be wrong, but there was something along those lines.
No, I honestly don't recall that, if that happened, and maybe our audience can put me right in the comments. I would have thought that if the Biden administration barred the Washington Post in particular from the briefing room, there would have been a very big rumpus about it. But well, firstly, in defense of the mainstream media, I think that often the extent of the quote-unquote left-wing bias is very, very exaggerated. And I think there has been a concerted effort, going back about 40 years, as you say, to finance efforts that are really intended to discredit the mainstream media. So Fox News rose in part by blasting the mainstream media. But there's also this other ecosystem of think tanks and so-called watchdog organizations that are really trying, in my view, to bring the media to heel toward a conservative perspective. So I think that's a really big danger here. Now, in relation to the Trump administration, I think you're quite right to make the point that this goes hand in hand with the efforts to, lever people out of briefing rooms, for example, and put conservative organizations in. But it also goes to this thing that we're seeing right now in the Trump administration, where websites of government agencies are being taken down. Certainly there was a database of January the 6th related crimes that has now been kind of vaporized into the ether. And I think that this is a whole broader effort to change the information space in a way that favors the administration.
Yes, and I believe the media has done that as well. I think one of the bad things that's come out of the insistence that there is a liberal media bias over all those years is that it's driven all the media outlets, whether left or right-leaning, into their own corners. And now they only report on the things that are going to be convenient for their side. I think that's unhealthy. I think it's one of the major problems in our democracy right now that needs to be fixed. This is petty. The Gulf of America thing, I remember Hillary Clinton laughing out loud at when he mentioned that at his inaugural address. It's silly, but you're right. At the same time, questions about how we're going to report the news. When you talk about media bias, it's not that they're lying. It's not like they're promoting candidates necessarily, although some of them do that. It's really about how they're reporting on things, the words they're using, the terms that they use. And I think Donald Trump thinks that he's very good at this, using certain words like fake news, which he really put into the lexicon. He's hoping he can mold the way they report based on that. And that's exactly what this Gulf of Mexico comment is intended to do. And it's also intended to figure out who's loyal to him.
Yeah, I know, and it is at some level about working the refs, as we would say in football, about trying to intimidate other outlets to move in their direction, as I say, to bring people to heel. We try not, of course, to have only one view here in Rising, which is why we're having these debates, but we will go on to debate other things next, including whether universities are hiding where their money is coming from. Stay with us.